Can you honestly say that you can rely on your body? And I mean truly rely on it. Could I handle something seriously difficult and physical? Could I defend myself if I had to? Do I have enough energy and strength to still make good decisions when life gets messy? Maybe you're asking yourself the same exact thing. Are you feeling that some of the strengths you used to have isn't quite there anymore? And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're quietly thinking, well, maybe that's simply what it means to get older? I do not accept that. I don't accept the doubt and I don't accept this uncertainty. I believe in action. I want a body I can rely on, a body that will carry me through the next 30, 40, hopefully 50 years, whatever I decide to do with my life. I've boiled down the efforts that are giving me the best results to 6 very straightforward principles. And don't misunderstand me, straightforward doesn't mean easy. Some of them are obvious. One of them completely changed the way I carry myself as a woman. So here they are. This is how I am building my engine. The first and absolutely non-negotiable is the quality of my sleep. I protect it with everything I got because literally my life depends on it. And I'm not going to tell you here how many hours you should sleep, whether you need blackout curtains, or what time you should go to bed. That's not the point. I want to make sure that the hours I'm spending in bed are actually doing what they are supposed to do. So I measure. I want to know how much deep sleep I'm getting. I want to know what alcohol does to my sleep, what a late meal does, what stress does, what temperature does, because otherwise I am mostly guessing. I use an Oura ring, but there are plenty of other ways to track sleep nowadays, and what you use is up to you. What matters is paying attention long enough to understand the patterns and then actually doing something with that information. After years of experimenting, my 3 simple to go are almost embarrassingly basic: a sleep mask, earplugs, and a cold bedroom. The next one is my morning routine. And even saying morning routine makes it sound like a much bigger project than I think it needs to be. We'll all know the recommendations: exercise in the morning, meditate, breathe, cold plunges, journaling, stretching, get outside, don't touch your phone. And suddenly, before you even had breakfast, you apparently need 2-3 hours and the organizational skills of a military commander just to start your day correctly. I've tried quite a few of these things, and most of them probably have some benefits. But time is limited, especially in the morning. So I've become much more interested in a different question. What gives me the biggest payoff for the smallest reasonable amount of effort? For me, its answer is about 10 minutes. These are a couple of tiny things that have survived every version of my morning routine. I scrape my tongue with the Ayurvedic tongue scraper, which I've been doing for more than 20 years. I wash my face with water, put on whatever skincare I'm using at the moment, and that's basically the bathroom. Then I move for about 10 minutes. I like tapping, so I do some tapping around the areas associated with lymphatic drainage. I move my spine, I spend some time in a deep squat, always adding pelvic floor contraction and facial exercises because apparently I've decided that one squat should now multitask. I do a little work around my knees because I cycle and walk a lot and I want to keep them functionally well. And that's basically it. And then I reward myself with coffee. The routine has changed over the years. After Vipassana, for example, I usually come home and meditate every morning. And meditation replaces somewhat of the movement. That tends to last for several months, but eventually I find myself drifting back towards movement and tapping. And I'm completely fine with that. Sometimes I need to feed the dog first, or tidy the kitchen. Sometimes life has already started before I get to my 10 minutes. And I stopped believing that a morning routine only counts if it happens immediately after you open your eyes in some perfectly controlled sequence. Mine worked because I built it around my life instead of building my life around my morning routine. So, number 3 is food, which is probably the easiest subject in the world to overcomplicate. What to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. I've spent years experimenting with all of that. I've been vegetarian for 12 years. I've done keto. I've tried metformin, intermittent fasting, and prolonged fasting, following my cravings, ignoring my cravings, and after all of that, why surprisingly boring thing became non-negotiable for me. And that is enough protein. I don't mean enormous amounts, and yes, I supplement with whey powder since I expect quite a lot from my body. I lift weights, I cycle, I do jiu-jitsu. I want to recover from those things and keep my muscle as I get older, ideally even bigger than they are right now. My own amount changes depending on what I'm doing. On lifting days, I may eat more. On other days, a little less. But I generally do not go below 100 grams a day. That's my number, not necessarily yours. And this was quite an eye-opener to me because I started paying attention and I could easily look at the day of eating and drinking and think, well, I had some cheese, yogurt, something substantial for dinner. Surely that's plenty of protein. And then you actually count it. And sometimes the number is surprisingly small. So, this is one of those things where I think it's worth disappearing down the research rabbit hole for yourself. Find out what an appropriate protein intake looks like for your age, body, and activity level, and then look honestly at what you're actually eating. It's not particularly exciting. You won't wake up 3 days later feeling transformed, but if I want this body to become stronger rather than more fragile with age, I have to give it something to build with. Number 4 is one of my favorite topics, supplements. And I should probably disclose my bias immediately. I love supplements. I love the whole idea of them. There is something incredibly appealing about taking this tiny pill or spoonful of something and potentially giving your body something useful without adding another enormous task to your day. I've experimented with a ridiculous number of them over the years. There was my Ayurvedic phase. After I did Panchakarma in India, I came home with a bag full of ashwagandha and other herbs. There was collagen, coenzyme Q10, various things I've discovered through biohacking research, podcasts, and probably some very convincing marketing along the way. And strangely enough, the longer I've experimented, the shorter my list has become. Today, 3 basic have earned a regular place in my routine. Vitamin D3, which I take with K2, omega-3 with EPA and DHA, and creatine. Omega-3 was an interesting one because I originally became curious about it through Andrew Huberman, who I followed for years. And that sent me down the research rabbit hole. Eventually, I started paying attention to actual amounts and dosages of EPA and DHA rather than simply buying something labeled fish oil. I still don't particularly enjoy the taste, by the way, but some principles of healthy aging apparently taste like fish. And then there is the creatine. Mine is 5 grams, usually with my morning coffee. Of all the things I've experimented with, this is probably the one I find almost comically unglamorous, considering how much research sits behind it. It's inexpensive, extensively studied, and useful enough for what I do that it has simply become part of my normal routine. Of course, there are other supplements I still experiment with from time to time. I enjoy it too much to pretend otherwise, but I've become much less interested in building an impressive supplement cupboard. Partly because it gets expensive very quickly. Mostly because consistency is queen. I'd rather have a few well-chosen things that I understand and actually take than 20 promising bottles that I use enthusiastically for 3 weeks and then forget all about. The next one might surprise you. It became obvious to me quite recently when I started jiu-jitsu at the age of 48. I went into it thinking I was pretty fearless, and then I had my first physical interaction with a bigger male opponent and discovered this very instinctive, almost animalistic fear that I genuinely didn't know was there. That fascinated me. I don't live somewhere where my risk of being assaulted is particularly high, and I don't have a dangerous job. However, I wasn't suddenly afraid of the world. I had simply discovered a situation where all the confidence I had in my head didn't necessarily translate into confidence in my body. So one of my principles became learn real self-defense. For me, an important part of that has been experiencing actual physical pressure, standing opposite someone bigger and stronger than me, feeling what happens in my body when I can't simply walk away, and I gradually learned that I can stay there and deal with this. It hasn't given me some ridiculous confidence that I can now walk through dark alleys waiting for trouble. Quite the opposite. Prevention is probably the most important part of self-defense, but I know what physical pressure feels like. Before jiu-jitsu, I didn't. And then something happened that I hadn't expected. That physical confidence started leaking into the rest of my life. You talk differently, you carry yourself differently, you take up space differently. You're not aggressive, you're simply present. You stop being quite so apologetic about occupying the space you're already standing in. For me, that became much bigger than learning how to defend myself. I stopped feeling physically fragile. The last one isn't you need to exercise. I'm going to assume we all know that by now. If you want a strong, capable body at any age, and particularly midlife, you need to use it, challenge it, and train it. How you choose to do that, it's much more personal. What I want to talk about is something I misunderstood for years. There seems to be this expectation that if you exercise consistently for long enough, eventually you're going to start loving it. One morning, you'll apparently wake up desperate to put on your leggings and attack those weights. Well, I am still waiting for that. I lift weights consistently, and I've been doing it for years. I understand exactly why I do it. Maintaining muscles and bone strength becomes increasingly important as we get older. So strength training is non-negotiable for me. And yet, I'm still not excited about lifting. I don't particularly look forward to it. Halfway through a difficult set, I'm certainly not thinking, God, what a wonderful way to spend my morning. Well, cycling is different. I genuinely love cycling. On an easier ride, there are moments when I get this wonderful sports high. The bike is moving, my body feels strong, everything is working, and I could keep going forever. But give me a serious training goal, and cycling becomes hard too. When I'm exhausted and still have another 50 kilometers to ride, my love for cycling isn't magically making my ass hurt less. It took me quite a long time to understand that I don't actually need to love the difficult part. That removed a surprising amount of negotiation. I stopped waiting for the day when I would somehow start anticipating every hard training session with excitement. Sometimes I want to train, sometimes I don't. The session is happening either way. What I do love is what comes afterwards. When I finish a lifting session I didn't particularly want to start, or get off the bike after doing something that genuinely tested me. There is an enormous satisfaction. I'm tired, sometimes completely destroyed, but I'm also ridiculously proud of myself. And after doing this enough times, I understood When something physical looks difficult, I have quite a lot of evidence now that difficult doesn't necessarily mean I can't do it. So no, I still haven't fallen in love with lifting. I've just stopped requiring myself to. But I can have all the physical capacity in the world and still make terrible decisions. And that turned out to be the next thing I had to work on. Let's meet again to discuss just that.